folks. Nice of you to come along and choose to meet me today. Thank you for having me. Welcome to my office. I'm from Swansea originally, Mansleton, in fact, for those of you who know that area. And now I live in British Columbia, Canada. So I'm halfway up a little mountain, enjoying a drop of what we call here liquid sunshine at the moment. So not so very different from Wales in many respects. Anyway, my name is Cathy Ace, and I kill people for a living. Just fictionally. Don't panic. I only kill them on the page. And generally speaking, the people who do the killing are not allowed to get away with it. So that's a good thing, right? Anyway, I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about how I ended up being the way I am today. Big question. Well, I dare say you could blame librarians, frankly. The librarians who helped me find Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, the Famous Five, the Secret Seven on the shelves at Bryn Hyfryd Library when I was in junior school there. And then, of course, after that, my mum. Always blame your mum. It's always a good fallback position. Mum was a big Agatha Christie fan. And that meant that when I got through the Nancy Drews, she felt I was ready to graduate to Agatha Christie's more adult type of crimes. Although that said, the bits that I didn't understand, that I eventually did understand later in life, didn't stop me enjoying those stories at all, because they're good traditional puzzle plot mysteries, and a puzzle plot mystery is exactly what appeals to a child's mind. It's what appeals to a lot of adults' minds as well, and I still find that that's the sort of story that draws me back in most often. So I began as a reader, as many people do. And although I went to university to study English, what I found when I got there was that it was really about criticism of English as of English literature as it already existed. And that didn't really fit well for me. So I changed my specialism to graduate in psychology because I thought, well, I want to be a writer. But rather than just critiquing other people's writing, why don't I try to better understand the human condition, which is what underpins, to my way of thinking, all great writing? So that was my starting point. And I was very fortunate then to become employed in marketing, advertising, and public relations, which meant I got to write for a living. What a fantastic opportunity. Now, I'll be honest, the only writing course I've ever attended in my life was how to write reports at London Transport, which was a 2-day grueling attack on any sense of organisation and logic. But it did fit quite well with what for me is a normal way of thinking, which is quite a linear form. I do like to have headings and subheadings and what comes after that. And I have found that that sort of thinking works very well for me when it comes to plotting and writing mysteries. Anyway, worked in London Transport and various advertising agencies, writing for a living. And the other thing that that taught me, other than how to write a report, was how to write to a deadline, which really is incredibly important when it comes to writing. These days, I still write to a deadline, even though quite often that deadline has been invented in the darker parts of my own little brain to force myself to begin a task that I know I would put off until that deadline was coming screaming towards me. So deadlines are important for me, and I did learn how to write to them, which is useful. Don't let my publishers and editors hear me saying this, because I have been known to push the odd deadline or two. Anyway, through all of this writing, which involved press releases, advertisements, and training courses, I kept learning how to overall communicate. And that, I think, is an underappreciated skill for authors. Yes, it's about crafting a sentence that sings, but it's very much about communicating with the reader in a way that the reader understands what it is the writer is trying to say. It's interesting. I know they've done some studies about the range of vocabulary used in Agatha Christie's work versus Hemingway's work, for example. And Hemingway plucks vocabulary from all over the ether, whereas Christie sticks to a relatively small range of vocabulary. And in a way, that's another thing I learned when I was doing what we call technical writing. If you're using technical jargon, make sure you're really only using technical jargon to try to communicate with people who understand that technical jargon. And to be honest, the English language can become a bit like technical jargon when you're pulling from across a range of vocabulary where people are constantly having to run for a dictionary. I don't think it's a bad thing to have to look up words. I mean, goodness knows, there are a lot of words I don't even know how to pronounce properly because I've only ever read them. I've never heard anybody use them in the normal run of events. So, yes, looking things up is a good thing, but frankly, not every other sentence. Anyway, um, communication important. Continuing to read while I was doing all of this professional writing was important. And I found myself gravitating naturally toward murder mysteries. I very much enjoy them, and sit me down to read Jane Austen or something like that. And I will thoroughly enjoy it. But I can't help myself wondering when someone's going to drop dead and we can start solving the crime. So if you're a bit like me in that respect, you're probably my sort of reader. Anyway, on to that bit of my writing. Um, I entered writing crime fiction by entering a competition. Yes. I was stuck at an airport because my sister's flight had been delayed and I was there to collect her. And I picked up a magazine off the shelf. I know, shame on me, I didn't take anything with me to read. But as it turns out, that was quite a good thing. There was a competition in the magazine called Murder and Be Published. And all you had to do was submit a short story with a strong female character in it and a murder in it. So I thought, oh, I can do that. Anyway, a couple of probably months passed, and I suddenly realized the deadline for this short story competition was like 3 days in the future, and I'd done nothing about it. Procrastinate much? Me? Anyway, I happened to be visiting a client from my company at the time, Marks and Spencer's, who had their headquarters on Baker Street. So I literally sat in a car park on Baker Street, and I must have been channeling Conan Doyle or something because I wrote that short story in an hour and a half, entered it to the competition, and it won the right to be published. And that was my first ever published short story, Dear George, which came out in the 80s, just before I'd set up my own company. So, I wasn't going to give up that business just for one short story. But it did become re-anthologized onto the GCSE English language syllabus for schools in England and Wales in a collection called Thrillers. So maybe some people have encountered it there. And I was thrilled, pardon the pun, for that to happen because it was a bit like getting revenge on school. Anyway, I thought that was great, but I didn't write any more fiction. And the years passed and I was running a training business. I migrated to Canada. I'd written the 7 or 8 textbooks, which were putting to good use my report writing skills, but I hadn't written any more fiction. And then Martin Jarvis, the actor, the English actor Martin Jarvis, he and his wife have a production company, and they were putting together a BBC4 radio production series called Murder, She Thought. And they'd found my short story, Dear George, got the rights to have it produced. And the wonderful Alex Kingston read the story on BBC Radio 4. Now, of course, I'm in Canada at this time. My mum and dad are in Swansea, and my sister. We all exploded with pride, of course. And then shortly thereafter, I'm sorry to say, my father passed away. So I realised that apparently not everyone is immortal. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do anything about this fiction writing, I'd better get off my backside and do something about it now. So I did. That story is to do with January. So I thought, well, all I've got to do is write 11 more short stories, one associated with each month of the year, and I've got a book. Great idea. So I spent the summer doing that, more as an exercise for myself, if anything else. And then I self-published that book so that my mum would have a book of fiction, of stories of the type that she liked to read. And that was very important to me. I then thought, oh, I enjoyed that. I wonder if I can push myself a bit more. So I then tried writing 4 novellas, one related to each of the 4 seasons of the year. You're spotting a theme here, aren't you? And I very much enjoyed doing that. Then I did what you're not supposed to do. So don't do what I did. Don't even do what I say necessarily, but I took the copies of those books, wrapped them in ribbon, and I made a ransom letter. I literally cut letters out of a newspaper, and I sent the books with a ransom letter to a publisher here in Canada, begging them to release the characters in the book. And indeed, they came back and they picked the only Canadian character, Kate Morgan, who, like me, is Welsh Canadian, and said, we would like to consider a novel manuscript. So I thought, that's fantastic. So very excited. I'm underplaying it here. I probably imploded at the time. Anyway, I submitted the manuscript, and that book became the very first Kate Morgan mystery, The Corpse with a Silver Tongue. So that was thrilling, and I thought I'd made it. I had a publisher. I had a contract for some more books. I was very excited. But what you realize the more books you write is that you still have to put in an awful lot of the effort for the promotion. You lose control over things like when the editing is going to come back to you, what say you have about it. They did let me get very involved with the cover design, which I was very grateful for. And of course, ultimately, the books were written by me, of course. But I then found myself an agent who got me a contract to write another series with a British publisher, the Wise Inquiries Agency Mysteries, involving 4 professional female private investigators, all set in Wales. Yay! I dealt with their different editors, different publishers, different ways of doing things. And I don't know, maybe by then I'd written, what was it, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 novels. And maybe I was just getting a bit tired or a bit grumpy. Anyway, in the end, things weren't going the way I wanted. So I fired my agent. I didn't sign a contract with that British publisher, and I was dumped by my Canadian publisher. So I was sort of back where I started, really, and I couldn't have been more pleased, because these days the world of self-publishing has changed significantly than when I first tried it out back in the noughties. So what I've done now is, since I walked away from the 2 publishers, and well, one walked away from me, but let's not beat about the bush. But with that one, I've self-published, re-edited and published the short story collection, re-edited and published the novella collection, as well as a tale of psychological suspense set in a Welsh clifftop village that is inspired by Rosilli, and 2 Kate Morgan mysteries, with a third coming out, which will be number 11 in that series. The other thing is, I've continued to be involved in the community of crime writing, and it was at one of the conventions, which was held in Bristol, where I met a TV producer, and I'm delighted to say that the Kate Morgan mysteries have now been optioned for television. They're the same company who make the Agatha Raisin TV series, and they're considering what the plan is with Kate, that each book will become a 2-hour episode, so more like a TV movie, which is so exciting. And they're looking at putting The Wrong Boy on screen as well. They're planning to simultaneously produce and record it in English and Welsh. So it'll be one of those dual track productions, like Keeping Faith or Hinterland, all of which is thrilling. But you know what? None of it would have happened had I not decided that I wanted to become a reader. And I'm not even sure that it was a decision. It was something that felt very natural to me. So from librarians helping me pick out a Nancy Drew or an Enid Blyton, right the way through to now working with a production company on the script for the first Kate Morgan mystery movie, it's been quite an interesting path, not always a straight path, and not without its bumps either. But you know what? If you're considering writing, there is a world out there that allows you to reach out to readers and find those readers. I took one path, you might find a different one. The main thing I think to say is, if you're enjoying writing, write. If it's the business of writing that's getting you down, try hard not to lose the joy of writing. And above all else, try not to lose the joy of reading. Indeed, when I was feeling that maybe I wouldn't write anymore, it was going back to reading that really re-enthused me to come back and carry on with my writing. So track down a librarian, help them find a book that can hit you in your sweet spot, and carry on reading, folks. Thanks for visiting today. Bye bye.